Continued from the previous file, explanations of Look Back in Anger. Page 48. Jimmy asks his views about the Sunday papers. He then asks Allison, his wife, about her views. Both Cliff and Allison say that they have not read the papers. Jimmy insists on Allison giving her views about how she feels about the papers. Cliff asks Jimmy to leave the girl alone. Jimmy becomes annoyed. He says that Allison may be busy with her domestic work, but she can talk, she can express an opinion. Her burden of domestic work cannot prevent her from thinking. Here Jimmy uses white woman's burden as a parody of white man's burden. White man's burden refers to the Englishman's pride of dominating the world. England spread their imperial rule over the colonies which they established in the different parts of the world. They thought that the white man had the obligation to do so, to civilize the people of the world. Jimmy says that women rule the domestic life. This is the white woman's burden. But this domination over the domestic world cannot make them averse to thinking. Jimmy is an angry young man. He is always looking out for an opportunity to speak roughly and loudly and to attack women. His relationship with his wife has become very sour. He is very vehement in his denunciation of the world, including women like Allison. Note: the white man's burden. The reference is to Rudyard Kipling's poem The White Man's Burden. Explanation number 2, page 55. Jimmy, you bet you weren't listening. Old Potter talks and everyone turns over and goes to sleep. And Mrs. Porter gets them going with the first yawn. Answer: Allison is not listening to Jimmy's talks. Jimmy is expressing dissatisfaction because nobody is listening to him. He makes an ironic comparison between Allison's attitude and the attitude of T.S. Eliot's Mrs. Porter. In this case, the allusion includes Allison's mother and the implied training which her daughter has received from her. Nobody takes an interest in his talk but responds even to a yawn by Allison. He suggests that it is so because she belongs to a higher class. Mrs. Porter gets them going with the first yawn. The reference is to the waste land in bracket lines 199 to 201 bracket closed, which runs, quote, "Oh, the moon shone bright on Mrs. Porter / and on her daughter / they washed their feet on soda water," unquote. The image stresses the waste and apathy of the middle classes. Explanation number 3, page 59. He is like Daddy, still casting well-fed glance back to the Edwardian twilight from his comfortable, disenfranchised wilderness. Answer: Jimmy and Cliff are talking in the first act. Cliff proposes to Jimmy and Allison to go to the pictures. Allison says it will not be possible. Page 49. For her to go. Jimmy says that he cannot spoil enjoyment of the Sunday night by seeing a picture. He then bursts out vehemently at Allison and Cliff. He says that nobody reads now. He asks whether Cliff or Allison had read Priestley's play of the week. He complains that no one can raise himself out of their delirious idleness. Jimmy speaks almost in delirium. There is no method or sequence in his utterances. He wants to be enthusiastic. He wants a warm, thrilling voice. He speaks about J.B. Priestley, the dramatist. Priestley is like a good grandfather speaking from his comfortable and complacent loneliness. J.B. Priestley is an English dramatist of the Edwardian time. He comes of a prosperous family and his works are characterized by the acceptance of the established order of things. He has no anger or bitterness against the society. He holds to the respectability and orthodoxy of the Edwardian England. This explains why Jimmy is annoyed with Priestley. To him, he is a self-satisfied conservative conformist grandfather who casts satisfied glances at the society. J.B. Priestley was an English dramatist of the first half of the 20th century. He wrote Dangerous Corner in bracket 1932 bracket closed. They Come to a City bracket 1943 bracket closed. Summer Day's Dream in bracket 1944 bracket closed. An Inspector Calls in bracket 1945 bracket closed. The last play is his famous parable play set in 1912. The inspector is the embodiment of conscience striking home against a family of eminent respectability. But there is no note of bitter anger or revolt against the complacent social order. Edwardian Twilight. End of King Edward V's reign in bracket 1901 to 1911 bracket closed. A period characterized by complacency. It is the transitional period between the assured attitude of Victorian England and excesses of the total war. The twilight period means the period between Victorian confidence and 20th century doubt and scepticism. Disenfranchised wilderness. A place in which one is deprived of the right to vote. Metaphorically, one has no voice. Explanation number 4. If she were to die and wake up in paradise, after the first 5 minutes she will have got used to it. Page 60. Here, Jimmy speaks about his wife Alison in Act 1, Scene 1. Alison is all the while ironing in her absent-minded manner and does not respond to what is being said by Jimmy. Jimmy asks Cliff to give him matches. Cliff tells Jimmy not to start up his old pipe. It gives out bad smell. Cliff then turns to Alison and asks her if the smell is not stinking. Alison replies in her characteristic indifferent manner that she has got used to all these things. Jimmy now seizes on this remark of Alison and attacks her in his characteristic vehement page 50 manner. Jimmy comments that Alison has become accustomed to all these things. She has lost the power of reacting and responding to the situation. She has become a slothful, indifferent and unresponsive girl. In his characteristic satiric tone, he says that if she dies and then wakes up in paradise, she would get used to it after 5 minutes. Thus Jimmy attacks the callous and passive manner of Alison. She does not react to the situations and problems. She has lost the capacity of taking up the challenges of the time. Alison belongs to the middle class, and the middle class people are orthodox conformists. Jimmy is a working class man, fed up with the middle class apathy to the problems of the time. He registers his adverse reactions in a restless and vehement manner. He wants enthusiasm, a warm, thrilling voice. He is annoyed with the passivity and nonchalant manner of Ellison and other middle-class men and women during the post-war period. Explanation number 5, page 61. The old adverbian brigade do make their brief little world look pretty tempting. Jimmy is speaking about the monotony of life. Sundays are dull. He speaks incoherently. His attacks are always directed to Ellison and her parents. He speaks about Ellison's father as belonging to adverbian brigade. He is an upper-class man, always keeping up appearances. He has returned from India after war, but he is conservative and narrow. He lives in his narrow world and makes it attractive with games like croquet, homemade cakes, good ideas and good dresses. Explanation number 6, page 61. A. Just to be with her was an adventure ... to Ulysses. B. Would not have said Webster was much like Ulysses. He is an ugly little devil. C. A sort of female Emil Bronte. In the conversation between Cliff, Jimmy and Ellison, the subject comes down to Madeline, with whom Jimmy had an earlier affair. Jimmy warms up at the thought of Madeline. He says to Ellison that Madeline was more animated, more curious, more vigorous than Ellison. Madeline's curiosity about things and about people was also enormous. This curiosity was not just a simple nosiness. It was the delight of being awake and watching. Jimmy says that to be in her company was an adventure. Even to sit on the top of a bus with her was like setting out with Ulysses. Webster, the mutual friend of Jimmy and Ellison, has drive, edge and enthusiasm. Page 51. He has a liking for Webster, but he would not be able to tolerate Webster that night. He is the only one of Ellison's friends who is worth anything. Webster had guts and sensitivity, and that is a rare combination. Cliff comments that Webster was not like Ulysses. He is an ugly little devil. Jimmy is angry with this remark and says that he is not speaking about Webster. Webster is all right in his own way. He is a sort of female Emil Bronte. Jimmy reverses the sex because Webster is a homosexual. There is a hidden irony in the fact that Penelope, wife of Ulysses, is the mythic epitome of patience and faithfulness. Ulysses was a great adventurer and fighter who took part in the Trojan War. Ulysses felt the thrill of life. To go with Madeline gave Jimmy that thrill and excitement. Emily Bronte, the famous Victorian novelist who wrote Wuthering Heights, a terrible novel of savage passion and lurid tragedy. Explanation number 7, page 65. And don't let the Marquess of Queensberry manner fool you. They will kick you in the groin while you are handing your hat to the maid. Here Jimmy speaks about Ellison's mother. Jimmy's tirades do not elicit any response from Cliff and Ellison. He is therefore annoyed, but he indulges in rhetoric in order to excite Ellison. So he refers to Ellison's parents. He compares Ellison's mother to the Marquess of Queensberry, Douglas William, 4th Marquess of the Queensberry. He was a famous sporting peer who drew up the first rules to regulate the sport of boxing. The implied point is that Ellison's mother appears to play by the rules, she has polite manner, but beneath the surface she remains a vicious and unscrupulous enemy. He says that Allison's father and mother, who behave in a hypocritical manner, would kick you in the waist when the other would hand the hat to the maid. It suggests that they would be polite outside, but they would be aggressive inside. Explanation number 8, page 65. The lady Pusillanimous seen here with her husband Sextus on their way to the games. Answer. It is a part of the incoherent tirades of Jimmy, who is disillusioned with his age and angry with the society. Jimmy tells that Nigel, Allison's brother, and Allison are sycophantic, phlegmatic, and pusillanimous. He uses the big word pusillanimous in a deliberate manner. He says that it is the word which he has picked up the other day. It is the word which fits Nigel and Allison very much. Page 52. Cliff does not understand the meaning of the word very much. Jimmy explains that he has been married to Allison, who is the very example of passivity, unresponsiveness, and non-attachment. He cannot find a word suitable enough to describe her. Now he has found the word pusillanimous. It actually means craven-hearted or cowardly. But it is a big word which should not be used simply as an adjective but as a noun. Allison should be named Pusillanimous. She would be the Lady Pusillanimous married to Sextus. Sextus was a Greek physician whose writings are the chief source of information on the skeptical school of philosophy. In his, quote, Pyrrhonian sketches, unquote, he states the position of the skeptics and attacks that of the dogmatists. Jimmy describes himself as a Sextus, who is a skeptic and cynical, but his wife is cowardly, callous, and craven-hearted. Thus the two are ill-matched. The Lady Pusillanimous sounds like the Roman matron married to the Roman emperor. The ill-matched couple are going to see the games just as the Roman emperor and empress used to go to enjoy the games at the Roman amphitheater. This is a very serious and cynical attack on Allison. Jimmy suggests the vicious reality beneath the polite and cultivated surface of English middle-class society. The image implies that Jimmy and Allison are like gladiators or wild beasts in the Roman amphitheater. They are locked in deadly combat. Explanation number 9, page 68. Did you ever see some dirty old Arab sticking his fingers into some mass of lamb fat and gristly? Your guts out in no time. Jimmy continues his attacks on Allison. Jimmy's main point of attack is the lack of involvement on the part of Allison. She belongs to the middle class, which is characterized by conformism and acceptance. They do conventional domestic things as if they are doing something heroic. Essentially, they are noisy and clumsy. They kick the floor instead of simply walking upon it. The way they sit down at the dressing tables is equally violent. Night after night, he has seen his wife behaving in the noisy manner when she sits before her bedroom mirror. He describes her as a refined sort of butcher, judging by the way she handles her boxes and brushes. He compares Allison to some dirty old Arab. This old Arab belongs to the Arabian deserts, and their main occupations are tending the sheep and lambs. They do the conventional work of sticking their fingers in the fat and cartilage of the lamb. They tend their lambs and attend to their wounds and cuts. Women handle their objects in a primitive and unpolished manner. Page 53. Jimmy suggests that these women seem to be polished and refined, but they are really very violent and unpolished in their manner, like the dirty old Arabs. There is a suggestion that the cosmetics that the women use are made of unclean things taken from animals. They are unclean and violent in their manner. Jimmy points out that it is a good fortune that there are not many women surgeons. In that case, their clumsy and violent hands would have killed the patients. Jimmy's anger against women is expressed in a bitter and cynical manner. Explanation number 10, page 69. The eternal flaming racket of the female. Jimmy continues his tirades against women. According to him, women are noisy and boisterous. They are insensitive and callous. He recalls having stayed in a flat above which there were a couple of girls living. The girls used to behave in a noisy manner all the time. Even their simple and everyday actions were kind of assault on his mind. In spite of his pleading and protests, he could not prevent them from making a noise. Ultimately, he had to shift from the flat. Those girls must have got married now, and in that case they must be a source of great torment to their husbands because of their noisy behavior. The women are the symbols of eternal noise and disturbance. The noisy and boisterous manner indicate the eternal female. Explanation number 11, page 69. I don't give a damn about Miss Drury. That a mild old gentlewoman does not fool me, even if she takes in you too. She is an old sobber. Jimmy is continuing his tirades against Ellison. Much of Jimmy's abuse is directed against Ellison and reflects his deep resentment for women who, according to him, symbolize acceptance of things as they are. The church bells ring at this time and Jimmy begins shouting. Ellison asks him to stop shouting because that would rouse Miss Drury, the landlady who lives in the upper story. Now Jimmy's attack is directed against Miss Drury. He says that she will not fool him, although she fools others. She is sober because she gets more than enough from them for the place every week. Jimmy has taken Miss Drury as his surrogate mother. Here is a parallel between Jimmy and John Tanner of Bernard Shaw's Men and Supermen. Jimmy Potter is attached to Mrs. Tanner as his surrogate mother. Miss Drury refers to this Mrs. Tanner. In the world Miss Drury, there is a hidden reference to the traditional theatre in Drury Lane. Osborne's play has a number of these references to the British theatres in Drury Lane. End of this file will be continued in the next file.